You out there guys, this is Dale of Lone Wombat Airsoft and this is an Airsoft site review of Camp Nomad up in Barnsley. Now I need to point out this is a first impressions video review. I'd never been to the site before when I turned up on that day, so all the things I'm going to talk about in this video reflect my experiences of that day and that day only. And so with that in mind, we'll get on with the review. So the site's located on Hague Lane, which is just off junction 38 from the M1. It's literally a stone's throw away from the motorway and just north of Barnsley. The sat-nav dropped us off on the right street. It was a little bit further down the road of where we needed to be, but just head up the hill and there's a couple of signs posted outside front, so you know exactly where the site entrance is. We have no trouble finding it. Once you turn into the site, you'll go down a small single track lane and you're going to find yourself in the car park. It's got quite a decent size to it, but I think on like a really busy day you might have to double up behind a couple of cars, but that's not really an issue at all, to be fair. Once you leave the car park, on your left is the safe zone. You've got plenty of space for setting up, lots of bench space, it's all covered, it's all quite nice and high quality. And on the right of the main entrance is where they were signing people in for the day. So the walk-on fee for the day was £25 if you're not a member of the site, and £5 of that could be paid as a deposit in advance. I say could because it's not mandatory, but paying the deposit, what that does is it makes lunch free for the day. It'll be £3 if you don't book in advance, but considering how just booking makes the lunch free, I think that's a perfectly valid reason to do this. I quite like this idea. It provides an incentive for players to booking without really punishing them for not doing it, so quite like that system, to be fair. If you need hire kits, that's £30, that includes your walk-on fee as well. £10 of that must be paid in a deposit, however, because obviously they can't put the kit aside if they don't know for certain that you're coming that day, so £10 in deposit is mandatory with the hire kit. That hire kit includes a single G36 assault rifle, 2,000 rounds worth of ammo, eye protection and camo overalls. And to be fair, I think that is really competitively priced. I've been to a lot of other sites before and this hire kit can go for like 50 quid, so very good on that, to be fair. Like, I've not seen a hire kit that cheap. As I said, lunch was included if you booked in advance, £3 if you didn't. It took the form of a sausage casserole when we were there, which was actually quite nice. There wasn't any drink involved with that though. You can buy them in the shop on sites as well as various other crisp snacks, that sort of thing. And as well as the kitchen area, they also had an airsoft shop just past the signing in desk. There you could buy all your basics and supplies that you might need on the day. Other facilities included a shooting range out back. There were chrono testing on the sites as well. The site limits are 350 FPS for anything with full auto, and sniper rifles and DMRs both have a 500 FPS limit, so slightly increased for the DMRs here. They were giving away these orange tags once you pass the chrono test to mark which guns have passed, which is absolutely the way to do it. I really approve of that method. And there were a couple of portaloos on site. If you want to use them, then be my guest. I'm not going to join you, but yeah, the option's there if you need it. So in terms of the facilities on offer, it's got everything you need, and in my personal opinion, I think it is quite competitively priced as well. So what were the staff on the day like then? Well, I've not really got any major complaints from them. They're really quite relaxed, they were engaging with the players, they were decent people to talk to, so no big complaints. The only minor nitpick I have is the morning safety brief. Now, it covered everything it needed to. It absolutely said to the players, here's the rules and what you need to follow. But as they were reading them out, the guy was like reading at the sheet like this and not really looking up at the players. And what that does is it kind of limits the projection of his voice. It kind of diminishes the attention span of the people listening as well. So when you're reading those rules out, try and look at the players, not at the sheet, and it just projects your voice. It keeps people interested at you. They're looking at your face, so they're more likely to listen to everything. So minor nitpick on that. So for the players themselves then, the players I got talking to in the safe zone were really decent people. They're very inclusive. It's not like we were to welcome because we're the new guys or anything. They really got chatting to us. However, we need to talk about the hit taking. Now, to clarify this, I've been airsofting for the best part of 7 years now. I've been to a load of different sites, so I know full well that hit taking happens basically everywhere. It just does. It's a fact of the sport. However, I have not seen as many non-hit takes in a single day as I did on that one. That includes all the trips to Ground Zero I've done. It was just consistent throughout the day. Now, I'm not going to make a statement like that and not back it up with anything, so here's all the instances that I caught with my camera on the day.
Guy's literally tree stump down here on the deck. Tagged him. That was a headshot. He's not taking it. There you go, he's taking that. Good job. That, oh, come the fuck on. Oh, that was on target. I got it. Marshall. Oh, come on, mate. Hit. Come the fuck on. That's twice I got him, mate. What the? I shot him as he was throwing that.
Now, as I'm sure you can tell by my increasing frustration in the clips themselves, this was just really getting to me throughout the day. It was just consistent, and to the Marshals' credit, whenever I pointed this out, because I did talk to them a couple of times about it, they actually went off to try and look for these players, but maybe my description of them was off, or maybe the players themselves weren't listening or anything, but it was just consistent throughout the day, these same faces popping up in my scope. Those are only the ones that are absolutely 100% clear on the camera. There's some where the camera's shaking a bit too much, so it doesn't really show it that well, but there were more. So it just got to the end where by the halfway through the day, just after lunch, we were just done. We just packed in and went home. Now, obviously, hit taking is something that happens at every site to various degrees, but if it gets to the stage where it made us all just want to go home, then make of that what you will. So what was the site terrain like then? Well, Camp Nomad is basically a paintball site in all but name, but instead of having like compartmentalised arenas, they've just got rid of all the barriers, opened all the site up to everything. So what it has is kind of distinct little sections that vary aesthetically from each other. You can see where the barriers would have been on the paintball site, but they've just opened up to everything so you can play wherever you like on the site, which is absolutely the way to go in my opinion. What this means then is you've got a huge variety in terms of the terrain you're hiding behind, so you've got like these really high quality man-made barricades, some buildings, some forts, some decent structures to hide in, and then you've just got like the ramshackle wooden sort of things, and if all that fails you've got plenty of woodland as well with just trees and thick shrubs to hide in. I certainly think come summertime you'll see a lot more greenery on the ground than I did on the day. So obviously it's winter time now, it's all died down a little bit, but I think in summer this would really flourish and add like a lot of visual cover as well. There are also quite a few cool centerpieces to fight over, like these big missiles and a Stargate, and that just adds character to the site. It certainly makes it a lot more memorable as you're playing through it. On the day, I don't think we saw more than a third of the site itself though, so what this implies to me is that if the site is used correctly, then it's going to have a lot of replayability value there. It'll take multiple trips before you've seen it all, so if they play the cards right, you could get a lot of replay and get consistent players coming back to this site purely for the site terrain. So what kind of game types were being used throughout the day then? Well, the first one I played was an infection game type, whereby both teams would start up ends at the map. Once you shot a player, if you could medic them before their team did, they would then join your team. And the win condition was when one team had completely absorbed the other team. Now, as I said, it played out quite well, but there are a couple of issues with it. The main one being that it was played over such a large area, it made it really quite hard to get other players from the other team onto your team, because then the teams are so spread out, you've got various lines of fire on there. If you were to make a mad rush to try and get someone onto your team, more likely than not, you just get shot. What also didn't help is that the game kind of just morphed into an attack and defend one by the end of it. This is because we'd pushed the other team back into a fortification, and so we couldn't charge the fort because we'd just get gunned down, and they were on constant medic just like we were. So we couldn't really make any progress against each other. They couldn't break out of the fort because we had it surrounded, but we couldn't kill them off. So that just really made the game drag on a little bit longer than it needed to. So a couple of things on that one that I think could improve it. I think one, play it over a smaller area, and certainly in an area that doesn't have like a big base or a huge fortification that's really easily defended. You want to avoid the players like turtling up in a really easily defended location. Play it in just open woodland or somewhere with relatively little cover on offer. That way the players have to stay mobile, and by staying mobile they're more likely to absorb the enemy team into their team. That will help the game progress better, make it more interesting, I think. The next game we played was an attack and defend style fallback game, whereby the attackers would start from one point and defenders were on one hit, and then they'd have to move back to a separate point. However, instead of playing out like a fallback game, this felt more like 3 separate attack and defend games. And a couple of reasons for this. The first one was that once you actually shot a defending player, they fell back, great, but you couldn't move on to attack the next point until your entire team was at the location of the first one, including those guys that had just been shot and had to run the 150 metres back to the respawn point and not. So even though the objective's clear, you're sat around waiting for 5 minutes, waiting for your guys to jog back to the regen point or not, before they'll allow you to attack the next objective. The reasoning for this was that there was an explosive charge on the objective and they'd only detonate it once everyone was there. But I think to make that a little bit better, why not have it that the marshal detonates it? Have a player do it. Just have a big button or a plunger or something. Once a player hits that, that's it. That location has been lost. What that would then do is it adds a sense of urgency to the games as well. It's not just a slow creep forward, making sure that you eliminate absolutely everybody and waiting for your guys to run back. That way you can make a mad dash and risk it and then hit that button, bang, you've won it for everybody. Brilliant. That would just make it a bit more interesting from the attacker's perspective. And also, the whole point of a fallback game is to fall back, not to sit in one place until you get shot and then move to another place to sit in one place until you get shot. Have it so that both teams are moving, not just the attacking team. An example that you could achieve this, if the respawn point for the attackers, have it so that every time a person respawns there, the point gets closer to the objective. Have a guy with a flag and he takes about 2 or 3 steps forward each time someone respawns there. That way the attackers have less distance to run, it makes the game a bit more faster paced, it gets people in the game quicker. If you really wanted, do the same for the defenders. Instead of having like a fixed point, have a defensive respawn flag and every time someone respawns there, make them move back 3 steps. Also, I think what really didn't help in the first round especially is you had like 150 metres of playing area, but the defenders could only set up 10 metres in front of their objective. Now, 10 metres is way too restrictive for this sort of thing. When you're defending something, you want to get the people to spread out a little bit, not all clustered together in one little location. If you allow the defending players to move around a bit more and do their own thing, it gives them a risk-reward sort of thing as well. Do they push forwards to try and take out as many attackers as possible, whilst running the risk of they could get surrounded and taken out by themselves? It just adds another dynamic for the defensive team and will make that game a little bit more interesting, I think. Also, once we'd actually completed the second objective and was moving on to the third one, bizarrely, even though we were the attacking team, apparently there was a time limit we didn't know about, because they stopped the game 5 minutes after starting it. So we literally only just got down the bottom of the hill, had just started shooting up the hill at the other guys, and then the game was ended. But we're the starting team. We're setting the time to beat. There shouldn't have been an arbitrary time limit. If we took longer to take it, then sure, that just means that we have to hold it for longer the next time. Like, why was that time limit there? I don't know. It's like they just started the third game and then ended it. So it just made me question what was the point. Of course, then, as I said, the very first game, the Infection one, felt more like an attack and defend at the end of it because of the fortification. This next one, even though it was a fallback, felt more like an attack and defend with 3 separate instances of it. And then they turned that around and we had 3 more instances of attack and defend, basically. So imagine my despair when we announced that the next game would be an attack and defend game. In this one, though, there was only 1 location to hold. All the defenders were on constant medic. However, only 2 players on the team were allowed to medic their teammates back in, whilst the attackers are on constant regen. Now, I always raise my eyebrows when you have a defensive team in a really easily defended spot that are theoretically unkillable. Granted, yes, if you manage to take out the 2 medics, great, that's their team done. It's just a matter of time. However, theoretically, they could stay in that game for as long as possible, and as the attacking team attacking that sort of objective, you just kind of lose hope in the game and you just can't be bothered by the end of it because it doesn't seem like there's any progress. Like, sure, you can make a mad dash for the gates and take out 5 people at the sacrifice of yourself, but then if you go back and those 5 people are just straight back in the game again, what was the point? Like, if ever you have a defensive team in a single location, there needs to be a way to remove them from the game completely. What I'd suggest instead is, instead of having an unlimited medic, have it so that each player can only die 2 or 3 times and then they're out completely. That way the attackers have a sense of progress, like they can just whittle away at the defending team. Their pushes mean something. It means something when they take someone out. Because if you don't do that, otherwise people are just going to lose hope with it, and then you start running into problems of people not hit taking and they can't be bothered with the game and they're getting bored. So a couple of things in that, I think. The game after that was one where they had an objective. I think it was a bomb in the middle of the map and the 2 teams had to fight over it, but this is where we'd gotten a bit sick of it at this point. So, like, the non-hit taking had gotten ridiculous and it felt like we'd played the same game for like 8 times in a row just now, so that's when we decided to call it, so I don't know how that game played out, unfortunately. I think the problem with the game types is not a problem of variety. The intent is there. The intent of varied games was absolutely there, but the way the games were executed made them feel a bit too samey. So absolutely keep your ideas. The ideas are there for interesting games, but try and flesh them out a little bit to make them play more distinctly. It's not so they're different on paper, so they actually feel different whilst playing it. So a little bit of tweaking needs to be done there. So the thought's in there, but just a little bit of work on the execution's needed. So ultimately then, is Camp Nomad up in Barnsley a site I think it's worth paying a visit to? As it stands right now, unfortunately no, and that's a real pity as far as I'm concerned. The site itself is good, the land is good, the safe zone is fine, you've got plenty of facilities, it's competitively priced. But I can't recommend a site where I leave halfway through because I'm so frustrated with it. The games had started to feel samey, and there were a couple of rules in them that just made me scratch my head, like 10 metres from an objective. That's way too restrictive. But ultimately it's the hit taking that killed this for me. If your hit taking is worse than the ground zero NAE, then we've got a serious problem here. Is the site unfixable? No, absolutely not. The core for the site is brilliant, but the way it was executed on that day really let it down. The problems I've listed though are quite easily fixed. Like, obviously, do you know, I can't even really blame the marshals for the hit taking because they were acting on it, but you just have to clamp down hard on that sort of thing. I know you have limited control on what the players do, but the control you do have, you really have to enforce that shit. So, yes, the site can be salvaged, absolutely. I think this would be a really good site if all the things I've listed in this video are acted upon. But I can't say I recommend or don't recommend a site based upon what it could be. I can only say whether I think you should go or not based on what I saw, what my experience was, and my experience that day was not a good one. If I leave the site frustrated, then I'm afraid I can't recommend it to people. Now, despite the downbeat tone of this video, I do hope you've enjoyed my video review of Camp Nomad up in Barnsley. Now, if you've got any questions you want to ask me, or maybe you want to share your experiences of the site, leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And until next time, this has been Dale of Lone Wombat Airsoft.